If I go mute, it's just because I'm trying to be respectful.
I appreciate it, but it's a conversation, and so like we're meant to step on a line. I'm very verbose sometimes, and it's like Adrian, shut up,
Uh,
So like that should be the entrance of everyone. Adrian, shut up.
mhm.
That should be the soundbite.
I've actually been using this kind of banter as the intro to the show, so we'll probably just leave it in.
See? I love it.
Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Glow Up Fabulous Conversations with Innovative Minds. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of chatting with Adrian Rashad Driscoll, CEO of Collimation and doer of many things in the worlds of art and XR. Adrian, so good to see you.
Peace. Happy to be here.
Amazing. So great to have you on the Glow Up. First off, you are somebody who does a lot in the worlds of spatial computing and art and music. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and maybe try to hint at some of the origins to your work in innovative technologies?
Okay. Yeah, that's a big question. Peace, everybody. Adrian Rashad Driscoll. I am a top 100 XR expert, storyteller first. That just means I'm a nerd that likes to tell stories. Sometimes use a headset. Yeah, you understand. Yeah, you're on the same page. But yeah, I've been in XR for 12 years now. I started out with a company called Oculus, and I fell in love with the ability to tell certain stories. I've always been I've never had a job, so I wasn't working for Oculus. I was a contractor. I've never had a job in my life, but well, I'm not sure we'll dive into that. But yeah, I was a contractor there. I fell in love with the storytelling ability, and then I was so heartbroken that nobody was using it. Not nobody, but most people were using it as a gimmick as opposed to creating impactful and engaging and empathic stories. So I used that leverage, and I started telling my story through the medium. And now I try to get rid of people using tech for tech's sake. I tell people and I tell companies and brands, how do you leverage this technology without making friction, with having it have an actual impact for you and your users?
So, are you able to share some examples of maybe one of your favorite stories that you've been able to tell with VR technologies?
Absolutely. The most impactful and completely my favorite story so far is Footprints Through Time. We use volumetric capture mixed with augmented reality to tell the stories of the transatlantic slave trade. And although most people wouldn't believe it, racism is still very prominent in America. I've been called a lot of things this year that I shouldn't have been called. So it's surprising to people who don't understand it. But you can't just go and yell at people, say, "Oh, you're bad because you're white," and it's like, wait, what? So the goal is always to create empathy, to create understanding, and create conversation. So you have a young boy, not young, he's 18, but I'm old, so he's young to me. But we got this kid who is with his best friend, and that's who you play. You play his best friend, and he sees this old woman, just standing at some benches, and she's actually a great great grandmother of him, who was sent here to tell him stories. So you're a part of this journey, and you guys all go together and you learn. And it's very matter of fact. It's not you're bad, you're bad. It's none of that. It's here's what happened. Here's people who did this. Here's how it happened. So with that lens, you feel more empathic and engaged as opposed to feeling attacked. And we've done very well so far, and we hope to scale it very soon.
How can people experience those stories? Is that site specific? Is it in a headset? How can people engage with that idea?
So right now you can experience it very easily if you live in Louisville. So we did it in collaboration with the Unknown Project, the Fraser Museum, Bernheim Forest. So there's a lot of it's very site specific. It's using VPS and on Eighth Wall. Shout out to Niantic, great partners in this. Shout out to Metastage, great partners in this. But yeah, it's site specific for now, but we are looking to expand it so it's a more nationwide approach.
I mean, the kind of stories that you talk about are far from gimmick, far from kind of shock and awe level flash that AR and VR can sometimes be thought of. You described a pretty tense topic. The history of the slave trade has some pretty gruesome details to it. How do you, as somebody who is, a strategist on this new form of storytelling, guide people to balance between the reality and the empathy that you can generate with 3D and immersive projects, plus the real human limits and experience goals that talking about a sensitive topic, or a topic that is full of emotion and history might. How do you advise balancing those things? How do you approach sticky problems like that?
I love the question. One thing to kind of soften the blow, so to speak, was we use animation. So we have volumetric capture, which is, photorealistic actual people, right? And then it's supplemented as we tell these stories through kind of a comic-esque animation, right? So you're still seeing Black pain. You're still seeing Black trauma, but you're seeing it in a way so you're not watching 12 Years a Slave, because nobody wants to see that. Great movie. But nobody wants to see that. Like, no one's like, oh, I want to go see a slave fit. No one wants to see that, right? But by nobody wanting to see it, it becomes a topic that's not discussed, right? And appropriation happens. We want to avoid anything happening like this again. So how do you avoid that if you never talk about it? That's been kind of the correlation. And look, we worked on this for like a year, and it's definitely changed me, you know, in what I think is a positive way. I don't know. I might just be jaded and be shattered now, but realistically, it's one of those things we want to have that in mind. We don't want people being turned off by it because it's so aggressive. So we thought animation was the way to go. And a very, very short story long approach. That was a long answer.
You've caught my brain's attention with this site specific storytelling. Actually, the thing that I was trying to get to was, tell me about the choice to have the primary narrator be like a third in the story, and that the viewer is kind of a secondary character. How did that relationship, and as you're thinking about directorially telling a story like this, how did you decide that that was the role for the viewer or the person experiencing through XR?
Yeah. And I think so many people make these experiences and they're cool. But like this could have been seen on a screen, right? And it wouldn't do anything different, right? So having these moments, like you gotta have seen Henry. Henry's a great example, right? Everyone's seen Henry, right? I assume you have. If you haven't, we'll watch Henry. But Henry has a moment where he has his cake and he looks at you. He breaks that fourth wall and he looks at you, he makes eye contact, and it's like, whoa. And you feel it, and it not just I felt it. My mom felt it when I showed her, and everyone else felt it. So it's like, how do I create these moments of inclusion? How do we create these moments of connectivity? Because we can assume you're separated from it. Black people are only 13% of the population, so there has to be somebody who doesn't understand what the plight is, right? So to have that and connect with you via that, you had to give the user a sense of presence, and that's why we connected that to give that sense of presence.
I finally caught up, I think, to one of the problems in the question that I was trying to get to, right? Which was, often XR experiences make the viewer the primary character, right? And if you do that, that puts a person like me into the potential for being in digital blackface. And that's probably not a very good experience for anybody involved. A way that you can experience the story with the right players and have a guide into it is very important. But in this particular story, it's kind of a problem to have anybody be that main
Right.
character. It's not
And
my
and to
ancestral
your point,
grandmother.
right, correct. And to your point, Isaac, his perspective, and I should have included this earlier, his perspective is racism doesn't exist anymore. He's a Black kid who's like, "What are you talking about? It's not MLK days." He has this thing in his mind that it's not that big a deal. So as a Black person that you play his best friend, as a Black person is coming with this perspective, you feel more comfortable coming with a perspective like, is it still? Because you may not know. It doesn't mean you're racist, it doesn't mean any of that. You may just not know that it's still prominent, right? But it's easier to consume when someone else has your same potential perspective.
There's some, I really appreciate that attention to like meeting the viewer where they're coming from and
Right.
trying to create a shared perspective, even though you don't necessarily know. what that perspective is. So as a storyteller, very juicy for how do you leave hooks? How do you open the door for common ground? And it really comes, I think, from some careful consideration of like, who is the audience? What do they know? What do they feel?
Right.
Do you have a specific process or approach for how you engage with audiences or potential users when you're building a project like this? Is research and getting to know those people part of how you build?
There's so much research that nobody will ever understand or see or appreciate. And it's just these fine details. And it's like, nope, that those shoes wouldn't have been black. And it's like, really? And for Mama Lou, who's our main character, plays a griot. We are authentic African chic from an African store in Leimert Park. And all of this has to be authentic or it breaks the illusion. And I'm not putting my name on anything that could have a broken illusion. No, this has to. Oh, wait. And then one person out of a million will see it and be like, "Hey, did you think of?" Yeah, I did it on purpose, and that's the whole reward. That's the whole reward for it. But yeah, it's ridiculous amounts of ideation, research, and revision. Like I'm still making revisions on the project months after it's released because I'm like, oh, you know what? That could have sounded better. What about that ting right there? And I think there was a squirrel in the background, and that's literally it because you have to tell the story. And I'm obsessive when it comes to that. Unfortunately, I wish I wasn't. I wish I didn't care. Kind of.
Well, let's get into the mind of the director, the mind of the CEO here a little bit. I really love how we dived into this project and this sort of mixed reality work that you're doing now. You alluded at the top that you've sort of always worked for yourself. You've always kind of been a contract. You've always sort of taken that founder's approach. When did that being a founder was your path? How did you sort of discover that? And what keeps you on that track?
You know, I came from a single parent household. At one point, my mom, who was making great money working for someone, she got tired of the way she was being treated. I saw it, and I'd see her come home tired, and I see her not have time to have family time. She had to be up ready for work again. So she still gave me time. I'm not. She's a great mom, but not having that time freedom. Your boss calling you, having to do an assignment, you having to do these things. I saw her struggle through that, and at one point she gave up and she said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to be my own boss. And she's been her own boss ever since. And me seeing that grow up, I'm like, yo, this is crazy. And I get my work ethic from her and my grandfather, rest his soul. And I started my first company when I was 6. I was literally pushing lawnmower. I had two employees. I was pushing lawnmowers up and down the street. I had 2 employees, and like the whole thing was, hey, look, at the end of the day, can we get hot Cheetos and Starburst, right? But I'm bringing in something to be able to provide for the family, and I had a whole medical thing when I was younger, but I'm like, oh, I could do it now. I can keep doing it, and I was doing entertainment. I was writing stories. I didn't know. I was acting. I didn't know. I was just having fun. So to be able to scale that and nothing changed. I moved out my tax check, $1,400, and it's scary as whatever explicit language you want to enter. It's scary, right? However, I can't see myself going and working for someone who's going to try to control my time. I have a son. I have a wife. I owe them my time. I don't owe this employer my time. So that's where it started from, though. To see my mom do it and struggle through it, it was yeah. I knew I had to.
I love it. One of the reasons they talk about why the most successful entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs, and it's not that they're successful every time, but they've done it enough that they learn
Right.
how to make it, how to build a business, how to
Right.
get it going, and almost like a muscle memory for how do you identify a problem, how do you connect with people, how do you teach the space, how do you make things happen. I find that most people, in addition to why they start a business, I can't even begin to imagine. I took the very opposite route, right? I had a day job all the time, nonstop until just very recently. And I have to tell you, there's like a weightlessness when you don't feel the pressure of that clock, or when you know that, like, because you're the boss, you're making the best decisions for the business. And like, it's nice to have that like comfort and lightness, confidence.
And it's really not comfort,
Mhm.
right? Because as a CEO, I work for my employees. Let's be straightforward. In Collimation, I don't take a salary. I'm working for my employees, but we haven't accepted a dollar of investor money either. Because I don't want to mess up. Like, you're thinking of all these lanes, and like, I got to do the best for them. I got to do the best for my company, best for my brand. you know, it's stressful. These gray hairs, these are collimation gray hairs. Between collimation and my son. These are those, but like, it's great, but it's not. Look, here's a small story. I had a client who's like, Adrian, I want to do what you do. This like 8 years ago. And I'm like, all right. So I want to quit my job and just be an entrepreneur. You should. It's great. Na- A week. She quit her job. She quit her job. She lasted 1 week. And she had another call for a project, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm back at work." And I'm like, "Oh, I thought you quit." "Yeah, I went back." Don't let me sell you snake oil. It's not easy. But if you find something that is fulfilling enough, then it's worth it.
One of the questions that I love to ask folks is to talk about how you navigate some of those challenging decisions to keep your idea or your company on track to where it's going. Are there ways that you've learned from your customers or from your audience that showed you how you need to change and adjust? How do you learn from those strong signals?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I learned is you're not alone in this. Utilize your team. And maybe sometimes your team doesn't fully know what the heck you're doing or what the heck your vision is. But if they're supporting you, let them support you in their vertical slice of what you're building. And you'd be mad surprised. I have the best team in the world. Not to say that no one else can build and do all these things, but they get it. And they're here to support the ultimate mission. So once you have that, everything else kind of becomes a lot easier. And then don't take discount clients. And here's why. We need the money. Oh, I got my mortgage is due on the first. I got to make this money. But the clients that are talking you down, they're going to give you so much headache because look, if you think about the people who buy from Groupon, and I buy from Groupon sometimes, they're looking for the best deal, but they're going to try to get the best out of you. And the more you let them squeeze out of you, that becomes your standard and what you're known as. You pigeonhole yourself financially into this bracket. $100,000 client, it's like transaction sent. $100 client is like, well, hey, look, can you change this and this and this and this? And you're like, I did it for 100 so I can pay my phone bill. But your thinking isn't their thinking. So understanding that and figuring out that relationship to where you can provide value over providing money, or they can provide value to you as a client as well, is very important. Those two things I live by.
I want to follow up on this. How do you, as somebody who works in kind of a new and unproven space, how do you put a value on what things are worth? And how do you make sure that you are charging what is right, what is fair for the kind of experiences that people are hoping for and that you're trying to build for folks?
So thank you for this question, because it's going to give a lot of context to my last statement, which sounds wild right now, I'm sure. You have to understand the difference between money and value. That's the baseline. Money is what you're being paid for something. That's cool. Value is what you're really getting, right? So to separate the two, right? If I want to buy a car, right? And this car lot wants a commercial and I want to do a commercial for them, right? Did they have to give me money? No, they're giving me value, right? But as a business, as a brand, my first thought is how do I bring value to you, right? The money doesn't matter. You'll never be underpaid for anything because it'll always come back. But how do I bring value to you? I've done things with billion-dollar companies where I've made 500 bucks out of the budget, right? I'm getting value. I'm like, okay, that's marketing spend because the next billion-dollar company is going to say, I have $1 million budget, right? Separating the two and looking to provide value and to get value as opposed to looking to provide a product for money will separate you and will always give you a guiding light to where your projects and your clients.
You also apply that to like the value of guiding somebody into innovative technologies, into XR. I mean, working in entertainment, in VR, right? The world of, talent management and engagement into film production, into volumetric. There's so many aspects that it seems like the value of working with Collimation is quite there. Like, how do you help it make better informed customers? How do you teach people about those challenges and the value of these sort of experimental ideas?
Having a narrative first approach, that's really it, because everybody wants photorealistic and 8K. I've talked to so many clients and I'm talking myself out of money. I can give you photorealistic 8K, just give me an extra X amount of dollars. But most of the time, it's not what they want. What they want is a consumer experience that's going to be impactful, that's going to be sticky, that's going to have people talking about it, social media, virality, whatever. Remember, Richie's plank was not photorealistic. It was not photorealistic, but you didn't step off the plank. So you can't tell me that your audience needs photorealism to be attached to the experience.
This is such a good
And that's what you
example. Oh my gosh, I'm always battling, over resolutioning things just because you can make cool graphics in 3D. Yeah, for those who haven't played a lot of VR games, Richie's Plank is a animated walk the plank game in VR where you put on a headset, you're put into a world that looks like you're on a very tall building or a number of other scary places. And it's a test to see, like, do you have the guts to walk? It makes for fantastic demo videos of people falling to
oh
the
yeah.
ground when seemingly nothing is. That demo alone does a really good job of explaining the potential for a consumer
Yep.
experience, for a memorable experience in VR. Adrian, we got it theoretical, we got tactical, we got into some of the agency side. The glow up, right, for those who may not know, is a notable transformation, right? A rebirth, a coming of age of sorts. As somebody who's been working in innovative storytelling in quite a while, with a number of projects under your belt, what are you looking to glow up in the next 6 months or a year? What sort of big goals do you have?
The biggest thing that I call a success, aside from Footprints was great, and my son's my biggest success. Shout out to Academy. The biggest success I've had was this program called Scale Up Immersive, where I was a co-lead, and we put together and designed this whole project, and we gave 30 companies opportunities to get into the XR space. We're focusing on Black companies in the Toronto and Ontario areas, and it's like, oh wow, this works. This works. I've had mentees tell me that they're changing their career, and I still have conversation with these students and mentees to this day, and I advise them. So we want to do more of that. We want to be able to scale that in a very major way. I got in through a NBC program, not into XR, but it helped me get some of these relationships. So I want to be able to be that bridge and that catalyst to really start helping people connect those dots. That's the glow up for me, to be able to do that. And when I die, people say, hey, look, it's a little better because he was here.
You mentioned earlier the kinds of like partnerships and coalitions that it takes to do bold things. Is there help or partners, resources that you're looking for to help you with this audacious goal that you just shared?
Yes. We just officially opened our seed round. So bring in money, please. This is our fifth year. We didn't accept a dime of investor money because we want to make sure we're doing it right. So yeah, we want to start talking to investors now. We have an incredible team that's supporting. We want to meet new partners, new technology. We're here for it. We want to continue to push this envelope to keep technology invisible so stories really have the visibility.
Oh, you just caught me with keep the technology invisible. That's like the opposite of what you would expect somebody selling 3D hologram, right?
Right.
But I want the story to be so good you're not going to notice how you heard it, right? Is like,
Right.
that's a pretty epic. Amazing. My brain got so excited.
I love moments like
Mhm.
this because you get it. You understand, you're very aware, right? And it's rare you get to have conversation with people who are aware. who not only understand the importance of storytelling, but understand the technology, understand what goes into it, So I'm here for it, Yeah. Ask away, please.
One of the things that you've been really generous with in this conversation is teaching about the Black experience, both in history, but also sort of alluding a little bit to like what it's like to be a professional, to be in technology. And I've sort of watched the ebbs and flows of corporate conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's often a trough of disillusionment that happens, right? Where companies and initiatives will sort of push women, queer people, Black people to the forefront to be a scion of diversity. And hey, won't you come work with us? And then when folks come into these systems and workplaces and others, they find, like you said, there's not a lot of people around that share their experience. They might have to be teaching diversity when they thought they were just going to be developing. How do you balance your empathy for your community, knowing the challenges that it takes to make an impact, to get a seat at the table, to build that sort of reputation where people will listen? How do you approach the opportunity and the risk there when you're advising and mentoring?
Well, it's crazy. Honestly, think of how uncomfortable it was for you to say that with just thinking because you're aware, right? You don't want to be offensive, but we as people, and not just Black people, people in general, humans, we have to stop being so offensive and assuming that it's something is because of something else. It's so easy to say, "Oh, this is because I'm Black." It's so easy, and that's such a lame excuse. Now, it does happen. And when it happens, you talk about it. Absolutely. But to say because I'm Black or because I'm this or because I'm that, no, maybe look, sometimes it's not because you're this, sometimes you just suck. You had a moment of being less than perfect. You had a moment of being human. Cool. But to have that mentality when you go into a room and say, "Oh, they're going to treat me this way because I'm this," you're failing yourself. That's be aware of what's around you. They still look at me like I'm a DEI project, and that's okay. They could think that. I don't care because when I walk in the room, I know who Adrian Rashad Driscoll is. I'm top 100 because I'm top 100 because I earned this spot, and it's not just me saying it. You look it up. So like having that confidence in yourself to say, "Look, I could mess up or I could be great. I'm not always great." Is going to be huge when it's actually starting to provoke change. Because if you start looking for change and you're always like, here's something I look at and people don't see it, like the DEI programs, right? The DEI programs sucked. Most of them sucked. You know why? Because you have someone who doesn't identify with the problem telling you solutions for the problem. You have to help people how they need to be helped. Okay. You gave me a glass of water. Thank you. You feel good. I gave you a glass of water. Well, guess what? I was drowning. That didn't help me how I needed to be helped. You thought you were doing something good to help me, but you didn't help me. You didn't meet me where I was. What I needed was a rope. You're like, a rope's not going to quench your thirst. You don't understand, you know? But you have so many people that I'm drowning are like, well, I can't give you a rope because that could be insensitive to Black people. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now I drowned. That's the problem. That's the problem. People consider themselves woke and they say, I can't say this. They won't have a conversation to understand why they feel they can't say this. They just feel they can't say this. That's why it doesn't translate.
I love this idea that the assumption that you have any sense of what is going on with with anybody, just in general,
Right.
it is like that's pretty bold. We are complex people. There are so many ways that we can have different perspectives on similar things, and I
Right.
find with just cycles around the sun, that adage of you really don't know what other people are battling, we're generally not as far away from each other as we think we might be. I think is are easy ways to get back to center. There's something, I'm always working in technology, thinking about agile and like this idea of constantly learning, right? Like, and most
Right.
success is like can you learn from what you did? And ideally, can you make the learnings as cheap as possible? That is how you eventually succeed in business. And what I'm hearing from you is this encouragement to be a little bit more patient and to be a little bit more focused on meeting people where they may be and seeing how you can engage and learn and grow even when programs stink or interpersonal tensions are at a peak, that there's always a way to get in there.
Because not everybody wants you to do bad. Not everybody wants bad of you. Not everybody assumes bad of you. And when you attack these situations with a cookie cutter mindset, you take away from the actual problems because now they can't be approached because you're telling everyone they're wrong because of your past traumas, as opposed to analyzing said trauma to say, hey, look, here was the genesis of it. Here's how we fix it. Now everyone has to have the same mindset, and we're too complex as people. It just doesn't work like that.
So I could go on this track forever, and we'll find the right place for all these things to go into. Well, I'm sitting here looking at my notes, and that we're 40 minutes into this conversation, and what you had marked on what we were going to talk about was creating more accessible concerts. And we haven't talked about more accessible content at all.
I'm here.
Do you got a few minutes to talk to get into accessible content? This is actually kind of a space that I'm very interested in lately because it seems like there's a whole new group of storytellers that have decided that for some reason or another, that VR is a great place to go see shows. What about like game worlds and VR and these interesting camera angles? What makes this such a compelling storytelling medium, and how can XR make concerts more accessible?
I love the opportunity to tell a story during a concert. And there's a story being told through most concerts, right? You have lights and da da da, and the story is very simple. Everyone's coming here to have a good time, right? But for me to be able to connect with an artist and tell a story to their audience that their audience may not have been able to have before, or they may not have had enough money to build using raw materials, that's special. The thing we did with Rhapsody, that was special. So we got to tell her story. We got to build an environment for her. The thing we did with the Goose Subway, like being able to tell this story in an impactful way is magical in itself. But then saying, look, this $2,500 ticket I can give to you for $20 and you can still feel like you're there. That's magic. That's oof, you know. So that's been our goal. We want to give you the energy of a mega concert, but still have the intimacy of an MTV Unplugged. And that's been our approach.
One of the things I've really been struck by is like the better than front row kind of experience that you can get in a VR concert. Just by nature of the content, it has to be kind of close to you,
Sure.
and that to get cameras in the right place and all that, like things start to really have an intimacy, but like you're saying, can have that scale of kind of experience or flash. You can build sets that are kind of like Tomorrowland without needing a multi-million dollar budget.
Right.
When
That's what it is. You're building Disney parks in a music experience. How could you not love that?
Yeah. How do artists interact to the kind of work that you do when they see it for the first time? Like, do you have to explain it, or do you have to like corral them in? Like,
The only way to explain it is to show it. This is one of those things that's like I can give you all the 2D videos in the world, but yeah, like you got to see this, And for our artists, we always try to make technology again invisible, right? I'm not putting you in a mocap suit. I'm not putting you in a face scan. Why? Right? Because that's not what you're used to. I'm going to let you be how you are because if you're in your natural element, you're giving the energy to your crowd that they expect instead of saying, hey, look, put on a mocap suit. And, it's like, what are you trying to get radio frequency? Like, what are you doing? It doesn't work the same.
I love it. You've mentioned twice now this idea of when you're trying to do something creative, right? You got to trust your team for their strengths. You got to lean into what that artist is good at, right? Like,
Right.
don't over engineer a project to get it away from the core strengths of the content, of the vision of the creators. It's so key, right? Like, just literally stick with the strengths, hire good people for what they do. You can make really dope stuff.
Right. That's it. You should be trying to take technology out of every project, not put it in. Your goal should be to strip the project down to what's the most delicious cut right here and strip out all the other technology. Make it as minimalistic as possible when you're making an experience, always.
Feels like we let the folks in Vegas determine what like experience design should be. And everybody got this sense that like if it's not an 8-foot blinking screen, it's not a great experience.
Right.
But I'm with
Correct.
you, right? Like I always talk about taking the right bite of innovation. You know,
Absolutely. I like the right buy.
the right bite of innovation.
Yeah, that's fire, man.
Copyright the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Adrian, it has been such a fantastic time chatting with you. I'm always inspired by the ambition and focus that you bring to your work. The sense of purpose that I hear in what you do is just so cool to see in a founder. And I think every founder out there is probably a little envious of. Thank you for sharing your perspectives on storytelling and taking technology out of the mix. I've learned so much with you on the Glow Up today.
I appreciate you, Nathan. We all have a part to play, and I'm happy to be a small part of something big.
Same. Thank you so much.
Always fun chatting with you.